All right, that was some Just Groove Me with Oz Noy and Will Lee, the great Will Lee, great bass player Will Lee. And good morning, everybody. How are you? From morning from LA, anyway.
Good
Steve,
morning. How
good
you
morning to
doing?
you. What's happening? Where are you at? You're someplace different today.
I'm in like Pine Ridge, California, up in the mountains, and it's really cold actually.
Oh, yeah, it's that time of year. That time of year.
It
Well,
is.
we want to say welcome to everybody. This is the second Saturday in a row that we're doing a live Facebook kind of webcam, what do you call them? Webinars, right? That's kind of the vibe. We're doing a little
Sure.
bit of demo, a little bit of teaching about some of the courses that we offer in my online school. And, we're happy to have you here. We hope you're healthy and welcome. So, Steve, take it away.
So I wanted to ask you. Wait a minute. I'm going to get rid of that annoying banner that's there. There we go. Well, first of all, I wanted to welcome everybody. This is the second time we've done this. Actually, we were on live last week, and there were 2,000 people watching. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And
Thank you
these
all for
little
coming.
lessons we're doing on Saturdays, they're sort of a little bit of an extension of the Dave Weckl online school. And you'll see down at the bottom of the screen there, daveweckl.teachable.com. So that's Dave's online school. And we have lots of members of it. We have about 40 hours of lessons in there with live footage, a lot of useful stuff, full courses. And anyone who joins the school this month, and you'll see it's $30 a month, similar to Drumeo. But what you get is a really consistent set of courses where Dave goes through his entire approach to playing drums. So it's a very cohesive kind of thing. And if you join, not only do you get to join Dave's private Facebook group where he actually answers your questions and he looks at your videos, but we'll also give you a Convergence play along as a download. Any of you have the Convergence record. It was a great record that Dave made a few years ago. We have a full play along version of that, and we're going to just give that to you for anyone who joins. So you can check it out at daveweckl.teachable.com. Today we're going to talk a little bit, about the groove aspect that Dave's playing. And there's something very, at least to me, very unique about the way that you teach this in the school. So I wanted to ask you, it's something called playing by motion. And in the school, you talk about how that's how you achieve consistency of sound and time and all that. I was wondering if you would demonstrate it, because that Oz Noy tune that you were just playing, I think is a great example of that sort of thing.
Right. Well, of course, the word groove is it kind of defines a whole, vast area of what we do here at the drums. And, the most important thing, of course, with understanding any groove or feel that you're going to play is to obviously listen as much as possible to the authentic versions of any type of style that you're trying to play. So whether it be rock, funk, Latin of any kind, swing, jazz, big band, whatever the style is, you need to get your ears on it, and listen to basically the creators of all those styles. That's where we all learn from. And then, of course, it's open for interpretation, especially in most of the music that I play, which is coming from more of a jazz fusion genre. So, that pretty much is just a heading and a title that allows us to do whatever we want. Kind of. We get away with a lot more because there's not so many rules of what you can do or can't do or what the sound is supposed to be. So it's one of the reasons I enjoy playing jazz fusion so much, is because it allows me the freedom to, to sort of kind of put in there whatever I want, within reason, of course. But when we're talking about, the groove and the feel, there's a few elements. Obviously one of them is the style consideration. and which I mentioned to get your ears on these styles. Within that is the sound of the instrument, the sound of the drums, how you visualize before you ever touch them, what the vision is of the sound that's going into the music. What's the drum's role in this particular song that you're playing? And for me, anytime I get something to play to, a track to record, or if I'm writing something or whatever the case may be, but it's usually in a recording sense, because I have the opportunity to take the time to maybe muffle the drums or tune the drums different, maybe pick a different cymbal here or there, depending on what the style is, and even the miking techniques can change, to have a more open sound versus a really tight, individually mic'd sound. So all of that goes into the vision of the feel and the groove. And then, of course, when our job as the drummer is to provide really good, consistent time feel, so that the people we're playing with can relax and everybody kind of works together with this gel to play together. And I know for me, when I first started trying to play grooves and play in time, I was so concerned about the precision of it, to be in time. And back in the 80s, growing up in New York, after I left St. Louis, drum machines were coming in, so man, you had to learn how to play perfect if you wanted to work, or at least close to it. And so the precision aspect became very important. And to do that, I would subdivide. I would da, 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 and which is cool. I mean, obviously subdividing, a pulse, so to speak, is how we understand how to fill up those quarter notes, right? With whatever the pulse of the song is. If it's 16th notes, 8th notes, maybe triplets, whatever the subdivision of feel is that defines, the motion of the song. So when I'm thinking about that, there's the pulse, which is the quarter note, and then there's the motion. What's the motion going to be? And that's one of the first things to determine is, let's say like in this groove that I was just playing with Oz's tune, Just Groove Me, okay? What I was playing was it was kind of an 8th note funk rock jazz thing, right? But a lot of the times the hi-hat is what dictates the feel of the pulse. Okay, so basically I was playing an 8th note pattern with a quarter note pulse, right? So. Okay, now I could change that whole feel by doing one thing, and that would be to play straight 8th notes, no accent on the quarter note, and watch how that affects it. Right, so that completely changes the whole aspect of the groove simply by changing the approach on one voice on the hi-hat, right? What Steve was talking about the time by motion, this is something that kind of started to make sense to me and really allowed me to play from a more organic, natural place instead of a cerebral place of counting and subdividing. Of course, to learn anything having to do with time and groove and feel, we need to understand how to make the organic human aspect fit in with metronomic, precise clock, okay? So practicing with a metronome, practicing with tracks, practicing with, some sort of a time source is imperative to, internalizing the clock, internalizing what you want to have as your basis. And then what I'm about to talk about is this time by motion aspect helps to humanize it, okay? Instead of thinking about the subdivisions and trying to get every little subdivision perfect, that's not really so human, and it ends up sounding kind of stiff. Sometimes that's wanted, desired. Who knows what the situation is if you're playing with computer parts, let's say loops that you have to, be right with that machine, or we used to call them sequences, to be in time doing that with a machine thing, then a little more attention has to be paid, because you don't want to be flamming with those machines or with those loops. But if there's space, like in most jazz situations, even this type of tune that's kind of a rock funk thing, there's a lot more space, to be flexible, where everybody gets into the feel of what's going on, and is humanizing together, if you will. So that's when it becomes our job as the drummer, in my opinion, to create a very comfortable scenario for everybody, so that they are not distracted, they're not tense, they're not worried about what's going to happen next, and of course the element of surprise and that kind of communication is part of making music, and I enjoy doing that a lot. But when we're talking about just the fundamental aspect of the groove, I like to try at this stage in my career anyway, in my life of playing, to make it as human and just support the music, make it feel as good as possible, right? So in this style, when we're talking about this kind of jazz rock type of thing, when I started studying with Freddie Gruber, this was, back in the 90s, I started to really understand a few things, about relaxing and using natural body motions, gripping the stick with more of a manipulative approach, with 5 fingers on the stick instead of clamping down and pressing and being tight. That's not very conducive to let me turn this thing up. We don't need that. Not very conducive to relaxing and playing something that feels good. So one of the main technical things that I started to really pay attention to then was the Moeller technique. Okay, and the Moeller technique we went over last week with the motions coming from the history of whipping with the wrist this way instead of up and down strokes this way. Both are valid, of course, but for me, when I'm talking about this time by motion thing, the Moeller technique is the main ingredient, all right? And it allows, most importantly, the space between the pulse quarter notes to be taken up with a flowing, consistent motion, okay? So I always correlate this to walking down the street. When you're just casually walking, you're actually walking in a tempo. And why is that? Because the motions are consistent between the steps. You're not changing anything, so you could put a clock to it, you could put a metronome to it, almost. So when we use that approach to play this type of groove, and we're gonna go back to the quarter note pulse, 8th note pattern on the hi-hat, but quarter note pulse, okay? And so instead of thinking of it up and down stroke like this, it's even hard for me to do without the Moeller on the hi-hat, but even the left hand, I'm just going up and down like this. And again, this doesn't matter match grip or traditional. In fact, most guys play matched out there. Now you notice I'm changing the angle here because I'm positioned for traditional. So when I play matched, I will always put the snare back down here. So I'll do it with matched so more folks can relate. So again, up and down stroke. As opposed to using Moeller motion, all right? So this, also not only does it feel much better to me, from an emotional, soulful standpoint, it actually builds in the accents, all right? But check out the difference. I'm gonna do a couple of bars, up and down stroke, then I'm gonna change to Moeller, all right? So. Okay, so you notice obviously what the difference is, all right? So I'm coming up this way with both of the hands at the same time, and that just automatically builds in a very easy way to play accents, non-accents, and again, that spatial thing, okay? So in the right hand, what I'm doing is playing shoulder of the stick on the side of the cymbals on the downbeats or the accents, and then the tip of the stick on the upbeats, all right? So from, give you a little different angle here from this camera. Okay, and if I were to turn that around and play traditional, okay, it would look like the same motion with the wrist. Tip of the stick down on the way up, right? All right, so again, you know, that allows me a very natural way to walk down the street, as it were, okay? It, you know, if the motions are consistent, the groove will be consistent. And that is, if you know, what I notice most in students is sometimes the motions change, so therefore the feel changes, or there's a glitch in the time. So this whole thing, you know, of the Moeller is really important for the consistency. All right, and then again, it's the spatial thing. So for me, I can dictate the feel, you know, what I want it to feel like. Do I want it to be right down the middle with the click? Do I want it to be just a little bit on top? Or sometimes it depends on who I'm playing with, what the players are feeling. So it's a feel thing. For instance, playing with Oz, I always have to kind of regenerate my natural tendency to want to play a little bit on top of things, and I have to lay back more. So what does that mean? It means I have to actually think about the spatial element being more, okay? So I'm going to do a little example. I'm going to play again to this just Groove Me track, and I'm going to just exemplify the difference between kind of playing down the middle, and then I'm going to lay it back a little bit. And the only thing I'm going to change and think about is just slightly more motion with the Moeller. Okay, this is this time by motion thing. So one more time with this. Okay, so first, right on. Okay, so I think it was a little evident, right, what the laid back feel did. And you know, this was, like I said, this was always a mystery to me when I was young and trying to figure out, God, where do I put this time feel? Where do I make this groove happen with the players? What do they want? What do they like? You know, so it can be a little bit intimidating when you're first trying to figure this out. And so this is one way to think about it. But it takes the training to, like I said, play with tracks, play with metronomes, record yourself as much as possible, and attempt to understand space, okay? Because it's the space between the notes that determines where the notes fall. It's not the notes themselves. We have to do something with that. Ba, boom, boom, ba, right? So this is a flow instead of a stiff thing like this, okay? And then the other thing too is that sometimes students get confused with is where is the motion going with the space and the time, all right? And I always say that, you know, to start with anyway, that when we're talking about this kind of groove, the subdivided eighth note, one and, right, up on the top, that's the arc. So if I was just playing quarter notes on the hi-hat, the arc the up or the up of the tap stroke of a Moeller, right, which would be up here, if I was tapping. But if I'm just playing quarter notes and not the eighth note, and to demonstrate the spatial issue, right, it's quarter note, quarter note, quarter note. But in order for this to flow, it's the top of the arc of the Moeller that is the subdivided eighth note. Check it out. So it's a consistent flow, and that's what I try to do with all types of grooves, you know, concerning this kind of thing and this kind of feel. But it translates to almost anything, you know, when I'm playing a Latin thing, for example, if I'm doing sort of a fusion salsa funk type of thing, right? If I'm going no matter what the style is, for me, I'm still always kind of implementing that flow of the Moeller, the flow. And I'm not thinking about the fact that it's the Moeller technique, right? This is the thing of, you know, technique is the means to the end. So this particular technique, along with other things that I'm doing, of course, with, you know, from that technical standpoint, allow me to express. This is the bottom line. It's like you want to express. So having said that, when we're talking about going a little bit back to the beginning of it, you know, because it is expression, so it's words, it's a language, it's, you know, you're saying something. So I always teach and believe that it is so important to sing the feel, sing the time, and sing the drum sounds. Actually, what do you want it to sound like? It's because it's not just doom, doom, boom, doom, boom, boom, bop, da, boom, boom, bop, right, for the groove. No, it's gat, doom, doom, gat, doom, gat, doom, gat, doom. And how do you make those sounds on the drums? It's got to come from here first, though, right? It's got to be the intention that you want to actually communicate. And again, the Moeller, you know, allows that dynamic difference to happen very, very easily. I don't have to think about it. In fact, without using the Moeller, it's almost impossible to do it on the hi-hat, okay? Well, I really can't do it. I have to think about it, but if I use the Moeller, it's built in. So no matter what the pulse is here or what the pattern is on the hi-hat, okay, I just did 2 or 3 different ones, I'm still utilizing the Moeller, okay? You know, when I'm playing that kind of eighth note accented with 16ths, which, by the way, also allows you to play things a lot faster than you would be able to with just one motion, okay? When you're trying to play. All those kind of things, that multiple motion stroke allows me to relax. It allows me to be able to play a faster tempo. And it again, it allows me to concentrate on what it sounds like. What am I doing feel-wise instead of worrying about a technical thing that's making me not be able to do it. So anyway, that's, Steve, long-winded answer to your time by motion thing, but that's, you know, that's kind of what we get into there.
That's really cool. Can you still hear me, by the way?
Yeah, barely. You sound like you're a little bit underwater up there in the mountains, but I guess that's to be expected.
We're actually under snow, as it turns out. But
oh my God! Wow. Okay. Well.
Right.
Yeah, we got you. You're all right. You're super delayed.
I Okay. All
There you
right.
go.
Sorry about that. Okay. So, what about talking a little bit about this, the swing aspect of it? Some people are asking about swing in the comments there.
Okay.
How you apply some of those techniques and
Yeah.
how you make that work.
Absolutely. I was teaching the other day. Well, actually, let me preface this with the swing feel and the swing groove. Again, this is probably, you know, if you're not if you're not knowledgeable, experienced, or have you know, a lot of listening time to a style that you're trying to learn. Like I said, that's the most important thing that you can do is go back, listen to the history of everything. And since we're talking about jazz now, this is the history. This is the big history because it's kind of where it all started from. You know, coming out of the marching bands and from that era, it became the big bands, the swing era, all of that stuff. So, and then jazz, bebop, you know, endless, right? There's so much history there to study. So, you know, jazz in particular, you know, when we're coming from a rock and roll setting, especially drum set sound, and just the approach, you know, it's a heavier approach to play rock type of things, even if you play traditional, right? It's still a heavier approach. And the biggest thing about jazz, especially when you're talking about playing in a piano trio, like when we play with when John Patitucci and I play with Chick with the acoustic trio, man, I have to I got to use lighter versions of my stick. I got to change up the cymbals. I'm using an 18-inch bass drum, tuning the drums higher, playing a lot softer. It's about the touch, which is why in the technical part of the school and last week we were talking about controlled strokes, being able to really be able to play softly. You know, so one of the things that's associated with jazz a lot is, you know, of course, brushes. And so learning how to touch with brushes can be very, very important and very helpful because they don't bounce, right? So you have to be able to touch and get the sound out using your hands, right? So if I'm playing just single stroke rolls, of course, the beauty with brushes is there's a lot of things, you know, that you can do when we're not just talking about vertical strokes, okay? Because that's a particular sound. There's also, you know, lateral strokes that Jeff Hamilton and the likes of guys like that play beautiful brushes, beautiful, you know, jazz feels, you know, create a whole other texture. But it's but these things are great to be able to learn how to touch. So practice these guys, double strokes too, all over the kit, you know, just. I think the biggest culprit with rock players trying to play jazz is the bass drum is really heavy. So you know, the bass drum is one thing to consider just to play light. You know, you don't want to be doing this, okay? That's not what you want to do. Okay, so it's about light touch and with the jazz groove, unlike the rock groove, which is built from the bottom up. It's the kick, the snare, you know, those are the foundational aspects of that style of anything having to do with that kind of style. Jazz is the other way around. It's built from the top down, sort of, with the bottom, you know, well, you know, back in the swing era, there was a lot more bottom. There was bass drums and, you know, 4/4, big 24-inch bass drums. But in the bebop era especially, it kind of lightened up on the bottom, and the focus became the ride symbol, and the jazz pattern, of course. So, simple jazz pattern. We're talking about triplets. We're talking about 12/8 basically. 12/8 notes per bar, or 4 quarter notes with triplets. Okay, 12 triplets. So your pattern has to be in that ding-a-da-ding-a-da-ding pattern. That's obvious. That's an obvious basic thing. Not that you have to stay there, of course. There's a lot of different approaches to playing the jazz groove. But one technical thing that really helped me, and I think probably back in the 70s, I saw somebody doing this that I was like, what's that? I'm seeing the back of their hand play, in like this. And that someone was Peter Erskine, one of my all-time favorites, good friend, and just awesome player. And, I saw he used to play his cymbals very high, so I saw the back of his hand, and I started to emulate that when I was a teenager as well. So I was kind of doing it for a while, but the technical thing is it actually flies over the front of the hand this way. And I was teaching a young lady from Washington D.C., originally from Australia, yesterday, and she's studying with Dom Fermulero as well. Now, I had never heard this term for this, but she said, oh yeah, that's the French grip Moeller. And I was like, okay. So that's what this is basically, is because of the French grip aspect of the thumb being up instead of American positioning with wrist being this way, it's more this way, but it's kind of utilizing that whip, a whip-like Moeller type of approach, coming down at the cymbal this way. All right, and again, this is kind of built-in spatial element that helps the groove. And this is another thing that Freddie Gruber later showed me, was that by really concentrating on that space between 2 and 4, you can really set up the triplet. And this is one exercise in school that I give, that he gave me, that really helped me understand where that triplet feel was. And it's kind of a simple exercise, but not so much. It's to get it to feel right, okay? So I'm doing left hand Moeller technique, same as the jazz pattern, but this one I'm doing this way, okay? So it's like this, right? Right, seems simple enough. But you'd be surprised if you're not used to doing this, especially with this thing falling over the front of the hand, man, it's a different thing to grasp onto. So, and you can do the whole thing with quarter notes. You can do it every time, all right? But we'll go back to the regular pattern, and there's a bass drum part too. The bass drum goes in right before 2, right before 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right, to really kind of give that triplet its space, all right? So kind of like this. That's kind of the basis of the exercise. Again, it seems very simple, but to touch it correctly, meaning that it's a soft touch, it's got, finesse, I guess is the key word. And then that bass drum, it's not, it's not that, it's just touching it. So, and obviously with a smaller bass drum that has a full head, no hole in the front, that's kind of coming from the tradition of the style. The drum actually breathes, so that note becomes a note, not just a a dead surface. So now even my 22, I have it kind of open in a sense, although I think I got a little more muffling in there for a recording I was doing, but it's still, it's got enough of a note value to it to make this thing playable. Now, when we talk about putting it into a real pattern and a real playing the style, of course you're not going to do that technically per se, but what I'll demonstrate now, I have a little tune here that is part of Convergence of the play along, and it's also in the school as a play along, and this is called 12-in, meaning that 12/8, and it's kind of influenced by the great Elvin Jones. Okay, and Elvin is one of the most important elements and factors of that kind of style that pretty much Elvin created. It's a very loose 12/8 type of thing. So I can't quite pull it off with the bass drum, but you get the idea. Now, pay attention though to the motions of what's going on with the strokes. Okay, so little demo on that. So this is 12-in. Okay. Right. Okay, so 12-in, that was the great Randy Brecker. Gary Meek is on there. Tom Kennedy, of course, and Jay Oliver's playing on that. So, yeah, that play along is available in a number of places on the school, and like I said, part of the Convergence play along package that we're giving away. So anyway, hopefully that kind of demonstrates a little bit of the straight ahead thing, and according to Catherine and Dom Famularo, it's French grip Moeller. I call it reverse Moeller. It's a kind of a reverse of this, right? So it's that way. But yeah, French kind of makes sense. So there you go. All right. Steve, what else you got? What do we got? We got any questions there?
We have so many questions. One of them...
I'm seeing a few over here.
Yeah, one of them was having to do with not having your sticks cross each other when you're doing Moeller strokes like that. Now, you teach a lot of that in the school, but maybe you could address that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. This is I'll reference Dom Famularo again, because when I had Dom into the school here to do a little interview, and actually turned into a lesson for me about the history of things, and we had a great time hanging out, and that's one of the courses in the school actually, is this whole little hang with Dom. He said something that always sticks with me now, and that is because in the history of things, there's different grips, right? There's different positions. There's German that's way out here. There's American that's more of kind of what I would think that I do. There's French in here. There's a lot of different ways to play, and I'm probably missing some. But the idea is that what he said to me, because the German thing is kind of it insinuates like hugging a barrel, right? So you got this barrel thing going on, and and it's like this. Well, that's a little extreme. Obviously, we don't necessarily want to do that. But if we're in here with American grip, and I find myself doing it all the time, if I don't actually think about a little bit of a barrel out here, I too end up crossing and hitting sticks sometimes. And I've noticed that it's becoming, it's becoming worse. I don't know why, but I have to think about it quite a bit. So it's a positioning thing of just a little bit of a barrel. So when we're talking about, the Moeller aspect, it's really not unlike any other, technique. Using wrist, using fingers, using whatever it might be. I still have to give that space, I have to, if I'm in here and I'm crossing, if I'm not thinking about it, sometimes those sticks cross. And it's honestly, it's kind of both, but it's more the left than the right. I got to remember out here. Now, another thing too, about this positioning thing that's important is, I'm going to switch to this camera for a second, because the geometry is really important when we're talking about not crossing sticks, but when we're also talking about the sound, okay? I have to correct a lot of students sometimes because they're not paying attention where this left hand is going. So all of a sudden the sound goes like this. Okay, so consistency and precision, where sound is concerned, it's not all up to the engineer, right? We have to make sure that we're hitting the drum consistently in the same place. So I always like to have this little, 1 inch, 2 inch circle, in the snare drum, especially if I'm playing stuff on the snare with both hands, right? And I stay out of the center on those edges, right? So positioning, the intention of sound, all of that stuff goes into, the positioning of where you're at. But think about that. Just think about a little bit of a barrel, hugging a barrel when you play so that you're out here. Now, especially with the Moeller, that can't happen from in here. You gotta be out a little bit because depending on the degree of Moeller, let's say if you're playing a groove, okay, is it going to be soft? So I would use low Moeller, right? Or is it a little louder and I have to use mid Moeller? It's a little bit higher, right? So or am I going to go full Tommy Aldridge, and Whitesnake and come above my head like this? And Tommy's a perfect example of, extremely high Moeller. And that's exactly what it is. Tip of the stick is down, it's whipping this way, super power, okay? So, but again, when it's happening to not click the sticks, just remember the positioning and just hug a little bit of a barrel. See if it works, all right? What else you got there, Steve?
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We have 2,300 people watching right now. So thank you so much.
Awesome.
And
hey, you know what? I just saw a question here that I want to answer. It's from Bob Pike, and he said, when I learn a tune, in particular a jazz tune, do I learn the chord changes as well as the melody, so that I can be supportive of the improvisers? And it's a great question because yes, the whole thing with not only a jazz tune, but like you said, any tune, to support the music, you have to kind of understand, well, you don't have to you do have to understand the form to kind of build it and support it correctly. And correctly is, it's not really the right term, It's kind of supporting it as you, as the drummer and the artist, give. That's why we're all different. It's not about the chops and actually the notes that we're playing. It's the support musically in the conversation. How does it feel to play with this person versus another person? So that's what makes it so beautiful and special. And also it gives great, I don't want to say hope, but I know for a while when I was young, before I started getting into the scene, I was like, man, what can I do to make it different? You know, there's all these great guys playing. What am I going to do to make it different? You know, so you can make it different. You know, because it's you. So that's the most important thing. But regarding this question, yes, I learned the song, I learned the changes, and so that I can, if they're not playing the tune, I'm singing the song so that I can play to it. Okay, and that becomes very important if you have to play a solo over the changes. You have to understand the form. You know, is it a 12-bar blues? Is it a 16-bar blues? Is it a 20? You know, is it a 32-bar AA, BA rhythm changes? What's the form? So it becomes super, super important, because a lot of the times I'll change cymbals, you know, or I'll, you know, in a contemporary setting from the A section to the B section, I'll change up the hi-hat pattern, for example. I might open it up. And then that becomes part of the composition of the groove. You know, repeating things that are, you know, to the ear, in forms like that are very important to the support, because if you're just arbitrarily playing grooves and notes and you're not thinking from a compositional standpoint, in my opinion, it doesn't have the depth or the maturity where you know, where it makes sense from that compositional standpoint. So I always try to, you know, well, not try, but I definitely learn. And in fact, you know, I started doing something last year where I would just take one song out of the real book and try to learn it on the piano. You know, so you know, another instrument, piano, whatever it might be, is always helpful to really understand the harmony, the harmonic aspect, the melodic aspect, because when we get into solos, I'm trying to always play melodies. I'm visualizing great horn players instead of drummers. I don't want to play a march for a solo. So I'm thinking about the melodic phrase, the hills and valleys of the phrases, you know, and the melody. But even in a groove, you know, there's melodic aspects to groove playing too. And you know, my wife is a great singer, and you know, we did a project together, and she said, you know, play some tom-toms on this groove. I don't want to hear a normal thing. I said, okay, Clivia, I will. So I had to come up with a groove. I had to figure it out. And but for example, instead of just playing, and this can be an example of A, B, all right, something like this, all right, I'll just do 4 bars of a contemporary groove, and then 4 bars for an idea of a B section, right? That's just spontaneous composition. Maybe I didn't hit the toms exactly right, but or the same. But the idea is compositional, coming from just the A section of the groove, changing it up, using more tom-toms. It's a valid choice, and you could do the same thing with cymbals or bells. You know, when you're talking about you know, groove type of things. There's another aspect too of where do you place the kick and the snare and the hi-hat according to who's playing what? Like, do you always go with the bass player? That's subjective, right? And it's basically kind of up to the moment. I'm going to do a little demonstration here of one song partially that my buddy Gary Meek wrote, and we're going to be doing this as a play-along, actually. It's a new song that's not out there yet. So Gary, if you're listening, I hope it's okay that I play a little bit of what the heck is the name of this? I forget. For a long time. And this was something when I recorded the track where, especially the chorus of the tune, I had choices because the bass player was playing anticipations, the melody was on a downbeat. So this is an example of choices, and I'm gonna try to find this. I'm gonna try to find this thing here, but I think it's around here somewhere. Let me see where this is. Okay, so I'm going to start there, and it's this chorus that's coming up. And the first time I'm going to play it, I'm going to kind of go with the bass player, with the bass drum. All right, so check it out. What it sounds like. So bad, that, go, right? All those things. Now, I can do this and go more with the melody that Gary's playing and the guitar player with him that's more quarter note oriented. So here's another whole different approach to the same section, right? So, two completely different approaches to the same section. Second time, I kind of went a la Steve Gadd stuff, and just played kind of like a 70s, 80s disco beat that to me just grooves like hell. I love it. So, but by the same token, I could do the same thing again and completely play more of a 16th note type of phrase. One more time, right? So that's the more busy jazz fusion approach, okay? And a lot of this comes down to, what does the composer want? What does the band, how does the band feel with different approaches? And it's kind of our job as drummers to give those kind of choices. It's like, hey, I can play this, I can play this, I can play this. And it's, because I hear all three or more of those kind of choices to play in a section of a tune. So, if you're rehearsing with a group, hopefully we get back to that someday, and playing, bring those up. And how do you come up with those ideas? You sing them, okay? That's how I always come up with patterns and grooves, is like, if I have to record a tune, we have this tune, another great tune that Steve Weingart and I did, for example, called In 5. And when Steve sent me the tune, I went for a walk and I was listening to the tune without the drums, and I came up with the whole pattern, singing it while I was walking. It came back, and it worked. It worked because I was not just trying to play a bunch of notes. I was actually singing something that worked in the support of what the music was going on. Not so much what Dave Weckl wanted to play, what the drum roll should be in the tune that I would want to hear anybody play, And then, of course, I put my own thing to it. But yeah, so a lot of choices, man, a lot of choices for grooves. What else we got, Steve? Anything else there? Or?
So I just have to tell everybody that the way that you explain all this stuff is amazing. I know everybody agrees. And if you join Dave in his online school, the amount of detail that he goes into in these courses is unbelievable. And part of that is because there's no limit to what you can teach, right? It used to be DVD, and there was a limited amount of time, and everything was produced to that format. But I mean, each course is hours and hours and hours. So just what you were just talking about, the musical, there's a whole course about that, and course and everything. Really amazing. So anyone who wants to join, DaveWeckl.com. Check it out.
Hey, I saw something fly across the page. Sorry to interrupt here, but David Rami says Gary Chester ? Yeah, Gary Chester was a huge part of my training. When I studied with Gary, to be able to gain the independence necessary to be able to play these choices, of different types of grooves. So. It's a very important thing always to, we're discussing groove today, but, in a sense, foundational development is key to being able to express yourself. So, if you're really serious about it, you got to spend the time to get the technique together to not be the next Buddy Rich, but to be, which ain't going to happen anyway, but, but you just get your hands together, to be able to express yourself so that doesn't become a stumbling block or something that's inhibiting you from doing what you want to do. So, Gary Chester, New Breed. Every drummer should go through that book, and David, thank you for reminding me. It's very important. Okay, one more question I saw fly by. Why do I play traditional grip? Sorry, it kind of went away. I don't know who asked that, but. Why do I play traditional grip? And the answer to that question is because it just feels like home to me. I learned this way. All my favorite players when I was young and growing up and watching and listening and eventually seeing, were playing traditional. So I came out of that school. And later, my explanation for it is it's about the touch, and that's the most important thing. If I have to record an out-and-out rock and roll track where there's no touch involved, where there's not much dynamics involved, where I have to play hard, and even in passages, if I'm playing this way, I will definitely turn it over and play match grip sometimes. The thing is that it's a lot of work. Great drummers like Thomas Lang, he told me, he goes, man, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore because I can't maintain both grips, and I agree with him. So that's why I don't maintain this. I don't really practice it. Thankfully, with all the online lessons that I'm doing now, I'm getting actually a lot of practice with this because most of the students that come in are match grip players. And I never, ever, ever try to convert somebody to traditional. It's crazy. So you can do anything that you want to do. And when we're talking about, most people attribute this to jazz, right? So, just go listen to Bill Stewart, and that will completely take everything out of the equation of can you play jazz match grip or not? Absolutely. So it's all doable, but it's a home thing for me. And the one thing that I will say is that when we're talking about for me after studying with Freddie and kind of getting out of this and going back up to a balance point again and allowing the physics of the sticks to take effect, where the bounce was very important and allowing me to play easier. The one thing that I had to do and make sure of was the positioning of the drums accommodated the grip. So you'll notice my whole setup is left to right down like this, starting with the snare. Kind of hard to see from that angle, but yeah, that's where it's, it's maybe a little bit, this is, these toms are up here. So, but what that does, it allows me to stay centered, from my body to be able to play comfortably. So I'm not leaning, I'm not doing all this type of stuff. Obviously for match grip, it's a little bit of a compromise now, but but that's okay for me because I play traditional 98% of the time. But that's why. And the biggest reason is about the tip of the stick and how natural that is to get to when I'm playing a groove. Okay, here's an example. All right, real quick. I know we're out of time here almost. But if I play this groove, match grip, pay attention to the snare drum. Listen to the ghost notes. Now check it out this way. Ghost notes, okay? You know, the jazz guys called it tipping for a reason, you know? They used to use that phrase in bebop when guys were tipping, right? Chick kind of gave me that phrase, Roy Haynes type of thing, you know? It's because the tip of the stick is making the sound and it comes back. So to do that traditional grip is really difficult. I mean, it's hard to get that. I can get softer, but the sound contrast is much harder to attain. I got to think about it a lot more. And the movements to attain it are not that natural, where with this, I just have to pull up this way. So that's a big reason why I play traditional, but I also use it for contemporary stuff, for backbeats, and that's when understanding the control points of the hand to get that snap, to get that crack out of the drum are very important. So all that stuff is in the school, in depth, you know, technique, grooves, you know, setup, everything. There's a lot of play-alongs, a lot of stuff. So hopefully we see you in the school, and our Facebook page is great. It's a very cool little community. I'm always in there critiquing and sharing, and everybody's sharing together. So come on in, sign up, and you know, a lot of stuff there. All right, Steve, what else you got?
So much that we probably could never do it because everybody has put up great questions, and I just again want to thank everybody for joining.
Yes, thank you so much, folks, for coming out and hanging out. I'm just browsing comments here, seeing if I recognize any names. But yeah, awesome. I'm having fun doing this. We'll probably be back next Saturday with another course to be determined. So you know, put it in your calendar. We'll be back here at 10 a.m. next week for another event. And stay well, be healthy, be safe. Steve, thank you, and look forward to you coming out of the mountains next week, hopefully.
Yes, hopefully it'll be a little clearer.
Yeah.
There'll be less sun on me, but yes. Thanks for doing this, Dave. Thanks for everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you in the Dave Weckl online school.
All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend. Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Have a good one.